You don't see me yet because I haven't been on yet. Now I'm on. So there I am. Obviously, it if I've got a test pattern up, that means I'm not there yet. So here I am. All right, greetings. Let's see if anybody else give this a couple minutes here. And what's going on? Craziness, lots of silliness, and lots of stuff going on. And we're finding bugs in LMS, and we just had a new one pop up today that was given to me regarding renewals. And apparently now there's always been this question in LMS, and it's showing up in the LPFM flow. And I've sent emails to staff and said, why the heck is this even in the LMS flow for LPFM or even non-commercial stations? It has to do with the non-discriminatory advertising sales agreements. And oh, wait a minute! I think I got a message back on that already just now. Yeah, okay. Staff just acknowledging that I sent them the bug earlier today regarding this. Apparently, I'm the one that broke this to them. So, if you guys experience bugs in LMS, feel free to send them my way. Yes, this is a totally unscheduled live call. Totally unscheduled live chat there, Ricky. And, well, if we can make the rest of your day, then, hey, we're in quarantine. It's not like we're going anywhere. So we might as well just hang out. But anyway, there is a bug in LMS. If you're doing renewals, if there's a question about non-discriminatory sales agreements, normally we, LPFM and NCE, you'll check NA on that. Now there's a bug that says if you check NA, a little pop-up comes up and says, hey, you got to submit an exhibit. And I think this went in at the same time that the 733555 question went in as a result of the court decision on the Prometheus case. And that the FCC is now making sure that on renewals, that they're asking the question as, do you currently meet all the 73355 commercial ownership rules regarding number of stations in an area, newspaper cross ownership, because newspaper cross ownership is back in again, where it was taken out for a while. The commission, Pi's commission, tried to take that out. Prometheus, basically Georgetown law, not the same Prometheus as like Paul Bain and Will Floyd and them who are fighting the translators, but it's the other Prometheus that that's part of Georgetown law that went to the courts to sue the FCC on the ownership changes that took place a while back. And apparently they got a partial judgment, I guess you could say. So for a while there on commercial renewals, we've been having to add an attachment on there that's basically states that the station is qualifying, does still meet 73355, and now it's a question. When they did that, I think they've screwed up this one, but workaround right now is just to put an attachment in to say, hey, this is an LMS bug. LPFM stations and NCE stations are, this is not applicable. That's the only way you're going to be able to get around it for right now. So a little extra work, and that's how it works. So we just had didn't we have another bug just recently come up on LMS? Oh yeah, this one was discovered by Todd Urich the other day, and LMS has a problem with long passwords. If you have a password that's 16 characters or greater, and you try to enter it in, LMS won't take it. The only way to get into LMS, and this is really weird, this has got me worried about some things, you enter in the first 15 characters of the password. You'll get in. This system is so screwed up this system is just so frickin' screwed up. It's crazy. But I didn't get on this. I didn't take this live feed to talk about LMS. Although LMS is a problem. LMS is an issue. This is our first chance to really have a chance to sit down and seriously talk about what's going on in with MB docket 19193. Obviously, we didn't get everything we wanted. You never do. But there may be some lights at the end of the tunnel here, and it's not at a point where we're giving up on anything. So let's just go through the quickies here on this. Yeah, thank you, Dwayne. Appreciate that. We're doing everything we can with LMS right now. Especially since I'm like one of the biggest users of LMS raw data right now. You think it's bad on the front end. Look at the back end. Look at the raw data that we get from LMS. And a lot of it's garbage, and we're trying to weed through it, and we do the best we can in the presentations on fccdata.org and in a lot of our internal systems where we're using this data. It is painful to say the least. And the problem with LMS is they've got third-party contractors that are working a lot of this stuff. And I'm right now in a big documentation project right now trying to get everything from CDBS to LMS mapped over. So that way I can find out exactly what's missing, and I can go to the FCC with documentation and say, look, we're missing so much crap out of that wasn't CDBS, it should be an LMS, that it may affect the filing windows. And especially one of the key things I brought up, I was bringing up talking to somebody earlier today about LMS, and we're talking about the fact that LMS raw data does not have anything about the translator's primary stations in it. And we have a filing window. It's going to be coming up for LPFM probably late 2011, early 2012, I'm hoping. 2021, 22, but that data is required. We need that data because there are certain rules and certain provisions in the LCRA that deal with translator inputs on third adjacent channels, and we need to make sure that we've got accurate primary station information in LMS. And also too, LMS will not allow you to enter in a LPFM station as a primary station to a translator. I don't know if they finally fixed that bug or not, but that was one of the bugs that we reported. Anyway, we had a couple days ago, was it Wednesday? Was it Wednesday? Wednesday we had Wednesday the FCC did adopt MB docket 19193, which is the LPFM technical changes. And that was done before the meeting. It was done actually in the evening. It was done like 7 o'clock in the evening. And remember, we got on yesterday. We did the live stream yesterday. We did the FCC meeting, and then we dovetailed on with the live chat. And we were hoping that in the live chat during that time that we were going to get the text of the report in order. Well, the FCC, in their infinite COVID-19 working from home wisdom, apparently I guess the Secretary's office was not able to get to it till like about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. So it was like way after we were already long gone and off the chat. And so, I spent last night putting together the summary and details that you find right now on the recnet.com website. And we posted it on social media last night and such. So these are the basics of what's of what we've got here. One of the issues that I'd been working on for a long time is trying to get LPFM stations in Tucson, Arizona, and some of the other areas that are within 125 kilometers of the Mexican border, the ability to run a full 100 watts. Currently, right now, there's a international agreement that any what's called low power FM station that includes translators, that includes boosters, and LPFM stations are limited to 50 watts if in the direction of Mexico. So if you draw a straight line along a certain heading from the transmitter site to the Mexican to the point on the Mexican border, if that distance is less than 125 kilometers, then you have to limit your ERP to 50 watts in that direction. Since the FCC only licensed LPFMs as non-directional facilities, they gave these stations in Tucson and El Paso and Brownsville and some of the other areas in the Mexico Strip zone, San Diego North County, even in the southern parts of Riverside County. They gave those stations a 50 watt all the way around non-directional limit. One of the things I did ask for was the ability to be able to use a directional antenna, even something as simple as a Nikon BKG77, to put 100 watts in directions that are not within 125 kilometers of Mexico, and then going the other way towards Mexico, be limited to 50 watts or less. We got that. Stations like KTDT in Tucson, KVAN LP in Tucson, our friends at KYOT and or is it KOYT? No, KYOT I think it is. In Anza, California, they'll be able to, if they want to, file for the ability to use an antenna to go, and in many cases, all they have to do is just repoint their existing antenna, and they can get 100 watts one way, 50 watts the other, and that's really what we're shooting for there. So we got that. That was a victory on our part, and the issue of directional antennas came up. And, the whole issue of directional antennas became a brouhaha, a serious brouhaha. Because honestly, we were looking for directional antennas originally. We were looking for a more liberalized policy on directionals because we wanted to do the translator protections using using contours instead of distance, and we were originally proposing the contour as an outer backstop on the LP250, so that way to prevent, to address some of the issues that EMF and some of the full-service broadcasters brought up. And so with those, we talked about using directional antennas to limit radiation in those directions and such. No different than a translator. And we even threw in the translator remediation rules that said, hey, if you do a directional antenna, you would have to use these, you would have to make sure that it doesn't cause interference, and we'd put you on the same standard as a translator for resolving interference. And which, the whole 45 dB thing, number of, 6 complaints or number of complaints, whatever, that whole thing. And of course the FCC, we're going to talk about LP250, but they denied LP250, they denied translator relief. So they were stuck with this directional antenna issue. And this directional antenna issue sent NAB and New Jersey on a complete hellstorm, talking about how this is going to be the end of the world, and we're going to have disease and famine among 5 generations if LPFM stations are allowed to use directional antennas. And when they originally came in with the draft, they pretty much the FCC came across and pretty much said, okay, for any directional antenna, regardless of what it's being used for, the we're going to require a proof of performance and a verification. Proof of performance usually comes from the antenna manufacturer. Usually if it's an off-the-shelf antenna, you can usually use the published tabulations of the antenna as kind of your proof of performance. I mean, normally we don't, do big proofing with off the shelves and things like a Scala CLFM, a Nikon. Believe it or not, but you can use a Nikon BKG 77 as a directional antenna. We've done it quite a few times. Anything where there's a published pattern like that. But when you start getting into the custom patterns, like you go to SWR and you say, these are my needs, and they build you like a $20,000 or whatever directional antenna with parasitics and such, what they have to do is they take it out into their test range and they try to run it, and they provide all this documentation. And what do antenna companies do with directional antennas? They try to charge you for everything. So when you start getting into the more advanced directional designs, the proof of performances can be very costly. And then the other part of that was that, these rules currently apply to full service stations. The other part of the directional piece would have been that you would had to have had a surveyor come out, somebody not related to the station or whatever, a licensed surveyor come out there, check the installation, make sure that the antenna height is correct, make sure that the orientation of the directional antenna is correct, and then sign off on it. That's an additional expense. That's what they decided to throw in there. Even though we've been doing second adjacent channel waivers with directional antennas for quite a while, no problems. We also have the rules regarding allowing public safety agencies to use directional antennas, no takers. And I really wanted to get this Mexico thing in there. And I went back to the FCC in the past couple weeks between the time the draft came out and the sunshine period when we had to stop talking about it. And I said, listen, you guys are taking out LP250 with the backstop, and even the alternate plan for LP250 that I'm going to talk about right now, or talk about in a bit, does not involve directional antennas. So directional antennas are out for LP250. You guys are rejecting the translator relief, which I'm personally not going to be doing too much pursuing on, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I said, so we're down to really 4 possible reasons to need a directional antenna, and that is the second adjacent, public safety, the international agreements, which includes the Mexico stuff, and also I threw in there the ability to be able to use a directional antenna down below 92 to protect a Channel 6 station. It's, the waiver of 73525, which we'll talk about here in a bit. And I said, listen, I gave them proposed rules, and I said, look, I want those 4 items to be the only items that a directional antenna would be allowed for, and have no requirement of proofs or verification. What we got out of the report and order was that for 3 of the items, for the public safety, for the second adjacent, and for the international agreements, including the Mexico Strip Zone, you would not need the proof of performance or the verification. And the reasons are that each one of those, with the public safety, which, like I said, there's no takers on that right now. Nobody's doing it. You're not actually doing this to protect a station. You're doing this more just to directing the power. Being able to run a lower transmitter power output into a higher gain antenna to still get your 100 watts ERP. So if for example, let's say New York State Thruway Authority, who was the one that asked for this, by the way, originally back in 2000, wanted to put up a LPFM station, along the New York Thruway, like between Syracuse and Albany or whatever, and they wanted it, and they just wanted to cover along the highway. and they didn't need it to cover, the areas to the north or to the south, just the east-west throughway there. Um, and they wanted to run the station on solar, and they were able to do 100 watts. It would make more sense for them to, um, do a directional antenna, like maybe like a CLFM peanut, 2 antennas skewed at like, 270 and 90 degrees, and running that into and then maybe I don't know what the exact gain is on that specific configuration, but if it's a result where there's an antenna gain, then maybe they'll only have to run like 50 watts or so from the transmitter, and they still get 100 watts ERP, and that's going to do good for their solar budget on that. And we have a few stations that have played around with solar. KBUU in Malibu has been. KUHS up in Hot Springs, Arkansas, KUHS LP up there, where we went to a few years ago for the Grassroots Radio Conference. They're running solar. So there's a few LPFMs out there that are running solar. KUHS, I think, is only running 2 watts. I'm not sure off the top of my head what KBU's TPO is right now. I'd have to look that up. I think they're like 78 watts ERP. We had to do some real finagling with them. And oh, by the way, they've got a composite directional antenna for second adjacent channel waiver. So so we kind of legitimized what they've got. I mean, what they had was already approved by the FCC, but now it's in writing that they can use a composite pattern. That's what we had to use for KBUU, was a composite pattern. Let's see, what else is going on? So we had in that way, so what the FCC did was they said, okay, for those 3 reasons, you don't need a proof of performance. However, we'll let any LPFM station have a directional antenna. You still got to meet all the distance separations. You've still got to, your maximum ERP at the furthest lobe is still got to be whatever you're authorized for. But you can use a directional antenna. The problem is that unless it's for one of those 3 reasons, you're going to have to go through the proof and verification. And to me, that was acceptable, because my big 3 items that I was, the big 3, I mean, I was worried about 4, but I got 3. And the channel 6 is going to be a few and far between. And also, too, we don't know what's going to happen after July of next year, when the analog LPTV's channel 6 stations have to sign off. So, and the FCC is, part of this too, which we don't, which is that where the channel 6 is that, and we'll talk about channel 6 here in a little bit, but they've decided to delay the big decision. They originally were originally going to say that LPFM stations, or actually any broadcast station, LP, full service, translator below 92, did not even have to do anything with channel 6. And the last minute, ABC, who owns channel 6 in Philadelphia, WPVI, they fought it. And so now we've got it to a point now where they're going to forego the big decision on channel 6, and they're going to do some little decisions on channel 6 for right now to get us through. And then they'll revisit that. They're also working on another rulemaking right now, 03-185, in respect to the Franken FM stations. So there's a possibility that what's being worked on, the channel 6 stuff may go into that. We'll see. Minor moves on LPFM stations. LPFM stations will now be able to be moved up to 11.2 kilometers, which is twice the distance than it was before. Normally it was 5.6. Now it's 11.2. That will not require a contour study. The FCC had received a lot of waiver requests. I sent in quite a few to get a distance more than 5.6. And I pushed originally for over 5.6 would require a contour study, basically making it kind of more like translators. Others wanted something a little simpler. They wanted the 11.2. Some wanted like 13 kilometers. Some were assuming LP250. So they were going 14.2, 7.1 times 2. Well, the FCC gave us 11.2. And if you need to go more than 11.2 in like a foothill situation, you'd be able to do it as long as you can show contour overlap. But honestly, we didn't have a lot of them that went over 11.2. And I remember doing one up in Washington State that was 18, I think about 17 or 18. And it was a case where they were going from one part of a mountain range to the other. So there was this huge lobe off of both ends, and they both happened to overlap. And the FCC allowed us to do it. I think that's like the longest minor move that we've ever done. But that kind of set the precedence that contour overlap would play a role in this. And every any of the applications that were tried over the past few years that didn't have contour overlap that were more than 5.6 were rejected by the FCC. So to me, it's consistent with translators. It makes sense. It's basically on key with what we asked for. Codification. First of all, I want to get back one thing on directional antennas really quickly, because I do want to clear up misunderstanding, and I think most of you on here know this, but I think there's a lot of newer broadcasters and a lot of people that have come from a ham radio culture. When they think about directional antennas and they think about the gain that a directional antenna can give, they don't always fathom the concept of effective radiated power. So, if you got 100 watts coming out of a transmitter, it's going through a feed line, maybe a low loss feed line like a 3/4 inch Andrews or something like that, and it's going to an antenna that might be a Yagi antenna with a huge amount of gain on it, maybe like 4 or 5 dB of gain. Yeah, that 100 watts is gonna pack a wallop on the antenna. And that's amateur radio way of thinking. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, 100 watts from the transmitter, you may get about 400 watts from the antenna. So yeah, we want to go with a directional antenna, right? No, because it's got to be 100 watts from the antenna. If you're doing that, then that means your transmitter power output's going to be probably about 20, 25 watts. And a lot of people don't realize that when they first hear directional antennas, because they think amateur radio. Because in amateur radio, we are using transmitter power output. If I've got running 25 watts or 50 watts on 2 meters into a 4-element Yagi, the 4-element Yagi might give me about 3 dB of gain. Yeah, that's going to bring my ERP up. I'm not getting actually 25. I might be getting 45 or so. So you've got to get out of that way of thinking. Directional antennas are still a new thing for LPFM. I don't think many LPFMs are going to do it. We'll be watching them close, and of course, as always, they can contact me and we'll set them straight. FM boosters, we've gotten FM boosters fully legitimized in this. Pretty much what I asked for. And that was the ability for for a booster to be counted like a translator under the ownership restrictions, the common ownership, because you can have up to 2 commonly owned translators. Boosters, same thing. Now remember, a booster is only for filling in a dead signal in your area, in the area of your existing service contour. It cannot be used to extend service contours. So remember that about boosters. Right now we've got one very successful booster for LPFM working in the San Fernando Valley of Southern California for KWSV 99.1 The Ranch. And like I was out there last summer, had a chance to drive through the zone between the primary and the booster, and yeah, it was very seamless. It was a very good installation. Both are internet fed, so the synchronization was not that far off. And they didn't do anything specifically for the synchronization, just because there's huge terrain there's a big mountain pass between the two stations, and once you move from one over to the other, capture effect is going to get it. So the switchover was noticeable, but it was barely noticeable, and it wasn't really that much of an inconvenience. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, feel free to dump them into the chat here. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Ricky was talking earlier about the LMS bug with the translator, and apparently he had a problem with on a commercial translator. Interesting. Systems is full of bugs. Lots of bugs in LMS. LPFM proposals on 88.1 to 91.9 that are short spaced at channel 6 stations can request a waiver based on a contour study. This is something I asked for as a codified rule. This is what I originally came in to this proceeding asking for. I've been asking for this for the whole time since RM11749. Is instead of using these flat distance separations, especially to the low power TV stations, not as much to full power as it is to low power. The low power TV stations, they were saying that every single TV station was this humongous 3 kilowatt at 100 meters above average terrain, this huge facility. And we did the numbers, and we found that there was out of over 150 or so LPTV stations across the country on channel 6. There was only about 5 or 6 that were up that high. Everything else was down much lower. So we've been overprotecting channel 6 LPTV for many years. Well, this is the we asked for this as the permanent solution. FCC put this in as the temporary interim solution. You still have to meet the distance separations. However, if you don't meet those distance separations and you use the contour study that translators use, where you have an interfering contour that varies based on which radio channel you're on, and a 47 dB contour of the TV station. As long as there's no contour overlap, you can show lack of interference. You will ask for that as a waiver, a request, and include the contour study. One of the things that ABC asked for, which I eventually agreed to, was that if you do ask for the waiver, then you just need to drop a letter, send a notification to the licensee of the TV station that's affected, just to let them know that you filed it. So that way they could look at it, and if for whatever reason they want to object, they can object. Now remember, if you do use a directional antenna, in that case, it will require proofs and verification. The other option that was given to us, that translators have had the whole time, was concurrence, which means that if you are short-spaced to a LPTV station, for example, on channel 6, and you're at 91.7, there's no way you're going to be interfering with that thing. You can if you approach the LPTV station and say, I'd like to get concurrence to be short spaced with you, we'll have dialogue in case there is any real interference. If you can get that concurrence letter from that LPTV station, then you could be waived onto you can waive the distance, and you don't have to use a directional antenna for that, so obviously you won't need the proofs and verification. So those will be the 3 ways of being able to get down below into the reserve band, unless the FCC does something in 2021 or 2022 to resolve this issue with the whole channel 6 thing. The channel 6 is just that obviously I think the FCC, in some ways I have to agree with the television broadcasters, even though I don't feel that digital television can get a lot of interference from analog FM stations. It might have been different back in the analog days, but with digital, I don't see the problem. I know that NPR did some studies back many years ago before the transition, and I kind of do agree with NAB and ABC on this. I think there needs to be a little more study done. I'd rather have fresh studies done that prove that there is no interference between anything above 88 that's analog with anything below 88 that's digital. And if we can make those showings, and if the reports come out that way, then the FCC may have enough to completely drop the Channel 6 protection requirements. That would definitely open up the ability, first of all, for existing NCE stations to finally expand out their facilities, maximize their facilities the best they can, add horizontal polarization to their antenna systems. There's a lot of things they'll be able to do. All right, where are we at? Let's see. We talked about Channel 6. EAS. The FCC kind of put an open-ended question on in the proceeding, and then there's a proposed rulemaking regarding EAS. And obviously, we gave them a complete rundown of the issue, of the overall issues as we've been aware of them here, in regards to situations regarding equipment costs, the certification process for the equipment, the costs of the software upgrades. Every time that every time that FEMA plucks their eyebrows, it seems like we have a software change and a key change and various changes to the CAP protocol. And I mentioned in there, which is true, LPFM. There are LPFM stations out there that were doing fundraisers just to pay Sage, and NDEC for the software upgrade so they could get the new FEMA code. And myself, I'm still running on DASDEC. I'm still running 3.1 DASDEC, which for now is still good. I know there's going to probably be a day that I will have to be pressured to upgrade it to 4, and put out the $400 or $500 or whatever it is to upgrade to 4. But right now 3.1 is working for us. So 3.1 is still legal if you have a DASDEC box. So we talked about open source EAS. We talked about that there's people developing equipment that could be used. There's the folks up in the Yukon and Alaska, the open broadcaster folks that have an EAS, open source EAS, because up in Canada it's allowed. They don't have a certification process for their CAP equipment up there, and they work a little differently. All their CAP comes either through over the internet, and the backup is a satellite downlink. They don't do over-the-air radio. And as we saw from last year's periodic test, depending on over-the-air EAS in this day and age was a disaster. It was unusable out here. Some states didn't even get the alerts. In these rules, the FCC has agreed to one thing, though. A station that's on two LPFM stations that are on a timeshare, and they're broadcasting from the same transmitter site, are allowed now to share a single EAS unit. So you don't have to buy a separate one for each station, which was technically the requirement before. So you could have one EAS unit in the audio chain. Both stations would be equally responsible to making sure that the unit's up and that you're getting the logs and that you have access to the logs. So that way, in case the stations get inspected, both parties need to have access to the logs in the system. So make sure that, so even if you have to do 2 passwords or whatever to get into your EAS box, you gotta have, both sides have to have access to those logs in case the FCC comes calling. We finally have codified a policy that, just a general courtesy that LPFM has been doing now for the past 20 years, and that is filing for silence. this was something that was overlooked back in 2000. In 2000, when the FCC decided to keep LPFM simple, they kind of overlooked, they took a few things out. They said, okay, you don't have to do ownership reports. Okay, you don't have to file an EO report. Okay, you don't have to have a public file. But they also forgot to put in there, oh, you don't have to file a silent and you don't have to do public notices. But the problem was that you have a statutory requirement that if a station's off the air for a year, the license is canceled. Now, while the statute doesn't specify that you have to file for a silent, it does enforce the 365 days. So filing a silent is a way to remind the commission, as well as remind the station itself that, the licensee, that they're silent, and then we have a date documented of when they went silent, so that way they have a target date to know what to go back on, file a resumption, and, get themselves off the 365-day clock. LPFM stations, even though they have been filing silence, they technically have not been required to. The FCC has not taken any action that I'm aware of against any LPFM station that hasn't filed a silent in the past. However, they have filed, they have taken action against ones that they eventually find out have been a silent for more than 365 days. But, if somebody is silent for 2 months and comes back on and doesn't notify the FCC, I'm not aware of anybody who's gotten anything from that. And even with that, it was defendable. It was defendable because of a lack of rule in 73-850. Now we're finally getting that fixed. And this was one thing I did ask for, was that requirement that LPFM stations file silent notification for more than 10 days, file an STA for more than 30. That needs to be in there. If we're going to run LPFM as a real broadcast service like big broadcasters, if we're going to be broadcasters, we have to behave like one. And and this is good training for those of you who are training people for the big time. We need to make sure we're following as many of the broadcast rules that are not that burdensome and such. I agree we don't need public file requirements. Public files should be voluntary. I think the FCC should turn on the public file system and allow LPFM stations to voluntarily file. That's why we have a voluntary public file system at lpfm.ws, because the FCC has lacked, and we do have stations out there that want to have an FCC style public file. They want to look big, and they want to be big, and they want to play like the big dogs. They should be given those opportunities. We're doing that. The FCC also upheld the fact that LPFM transmitters must be certified. There was a push in the comments in 19193 to say, well, what about type verified? What about type accepted transmitters? Problem is that when you do that, you're dealing with equipment that's basically hand-me-downs from other broadcast stations. And this is equipment that may need more monitoring. Remember too that in the commercial and the full service world, commercial, non-commercial, there is a chief operator requirement where a certain person is designated as the chief operator of the transmission system. And they're the ones that are ultimately responsible for doing the meter readings, making sure everything is in tolerances and such. And that older equipment needs to be more manually babysat. LPFM does not have a chief operator requirement. And one of the reasons why we don't have a chief operator requirement is because we have the certification requirement. And the certification the certified equipment is more likely to be resistant to out-of-tolerance situations. And a lot of it by design is set to automatically reduce, shut off, or whatever in the event of an out-of-tolerance situation. We also have the other issue, and that is the Chinese junk that's coming in on Amazon.com, the CZE and FM user transmitters and that crap that's coming in that apparently churches are now buying and setting up in their parking lots to hold services. I've gotten several calls already from churches that they ordered stuff from Amazon. Then they went and found my page, and they said, wait a minute, why is there a picture of the transmitter I just bought on there as one that's illegal? Oh, I bought something illegal. I got to cancel this and return this, And then we have to talk them into going over to part 15 AM or FM as a solution. But, yeah. I'm sorry, but I have to, there's a lot of folks that are really pushing for FCC to allow for, to not have the type certification requirement. I have to stand by it, and I have to support it. I am one of the few that actually supports the type certification requirement, mainly because of the imported junk that we're getting right now, washing up on our shores and sitting in Amazon's warehouse. That's illegal as hell. But the FCC and the Federal Trade Commission don't want to do anything to enforce the laws of our country regarding imported uncertified equipment. And also, too, the fact that because there's a lack of a chief operator requirement, a lack of accountability. It's in everybody's best interest to make sure that LPFM does stay with this requirement. And I know this is not a popular opinion, but I've been doing this craziness for 20 years in the LPFM. I've seen things. I've been involved in uncertified transmitter situations, and such. And in some cases, it was just the customer received the wrong transmitter because the vendor messed up. We've seen that happen. I was just involved with one of those last year in Southern California, KLIELP. You'll see that mentioned a couple times in the report and order in International Crusade of the Penny. I was involved in that. I was brought into that, and I kind of acted in that one. I acted as the mediator between the vendor, who will remain nameless, and the transmitter manufacturer Bext, and I will name them because they were frickin' fantastic through this whole thing. Bottom line is that Bext had two 300-watt class transmitters. One model was certified, the other model wasn't. This was the transmitter was ordered during the time of the big boom, right after 2013, when the LPFMs were starting to get granted. Apparently, they were out of the certified transmitters. The vendor, who will remain nameless, switched the order over to the non-certified transmitter, thinking, okay, what's the difference? The station installs the non-certified transmitter. It runs for several years without anybody knowing that transmitter doesn't have a label on the back of it. They get inspected by Lark Hadley's gang, and bam, we've got they got a non-certified transmitter letter of notice of violation. And so, I got on, I started work, she came, the principal of the station came panicking to me because we had we have a very close relationship, like I do with many of the stations in Southern California. And we went ahead and looked into it, and we did some investigation. And so I started working with Bext, and Bext did something very unprecedented, and their CEO did something very unprecedented, and that was, even though it's been 4 or 5 years after the transmitter's been installed, they did a 100% trade for a certified 300-watt class transmitter. The station operator actually drove down to San Diego to pick it up. That was frickin' fantastic. And I mean, even though I recommend BW and Nautel, mainly because I have more experience with those transmitters, Bext went way out of the way for that. So yeah, there's my transmitter certification story. But yeah, I'm one of the minority that feels that we still need the transmitter certification rule, and we're hoping that the manufacturers will start ramping up again and making more choices. We need more lower powered transmitter choices to deal with more hilltop situations, to deal with those who need like less than 50 watts of TPO. We need more choices there. Yeah, Beck stuff is mostly rebadged RVR stuff these days, mostly. Yeah, I think that this was, it was a situation where they were, like, you had one, and I think one model came from one source, and the other model came from a different source or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, that was a mess because they were marketing both transmitters, and only one was certified, so it was like if you chose the wrong one, you had a 50-50 chance. And I don't know why they would be marketing basically two of the same transmitters doing the same thing. One was a newer model, the certified one was a newer model, so there's like a few $100 price difference between the two, but still. At least Ricky's still watching. Okay, so yeah, we got you there. You're there you are. Oh, see, I did it right this time. Okay. Okay. What we had proposed, and this goes back to RM 11810, was that we asked for we made this huge local community radio act argument that the distance separation rules should only apply, the mandate to use distance separation should only apply between LPFM and full service stations. Prior to this, we had seen applications come in for people trying to waive the distance separations to translators but still keep full distance to full service, using contour study to show lack of interference, and trying to get a waiver that way. The FCC was coming back and was saying that because of the Local Community Radio Act as well as the prior act, the Radio Broadcast Protection Act, that you still had to meet distance separation. Well, in the Radio Broadcast Protection Act, you did, because the Radio Broadcast Protection Act didn't specify that the distance separation was just for full service. LCRA changed that. But so what we asked for something pretty bold. We said, look, as long as an LPFM station meets minimum hey, I'm on TV. Hi. As long as LPFM station meets minimum distance separation. Now, if somebody will put me on their Jumbotron, there we go. We could probably scare half the city. If we put on a Jumbotron, now, of course, obviously, if we have a station that is, see, this is how you distract a hostess right there. That's what that chat window is. That's called distract a hostess. As long as you're meeting distance separations to the full service stations in correlation with the statute, you should be allowed to use contours to protect translators, and that's what we were going for. That was called translator relief. That came in at RM 11810 when the translators were starting to move in, and we had to enforce distance separation in case stations wanted to move. They got to the point of where a translator could move in really close, use a directional antenna totally away from the LPFM station, but because that translator is still close, even if the LPFM station was to move and there would still be no contour overlap, regardless of directional antenna or not on the LPFM, that there would be, you couldn't do it because of the distance separation, because you can't reduce distance separation if there's a subsequent short spacing. We asked for the ability to be able to use a channel if we can show that it meets all minimum distance separations, but we use the contours just to protect the translators. That would open up many more channels for LPFM stations to go to, and to have more flexibility on channels, and also give us more flexibility at the window, especially with dealing with mutually exclusive applications and such. And the FCC felt, the FCC did not raise an LCRA issue, which I'm glad they did, and I think they finally recognize that what I'm asking for is not an LCRA issue. But the FCC doesn't seem to be totally sold on the fact that LPFM stations are can be complex. That some situations are a little more complex than others. They think that Dutrell is the only game in town for getting a contour study done. So, going to a 3,005, a big money per hour contract consulting engineer is the only way to get a contour study. Even though REC, Common Frequency, Paul Bain, Prometheus, we all have homebrew software, literally, that can do all the contour studies. I have the ComStudy software that I use, one of the two industry standards softwares that I have, which I had obtained through a past relationship, and saved myself about $10,000 there, by the way. So we have a ways, contours are accessible to LPFMs at a cheap level. Not the big price. The FCC did not want to deal with that. They wanted to, quote, keep LPFM simple. Basically, the original Bill Kennard vision from 2000. Keep the service simple. So they just said, we're going to stay with distance separation. We're not going to do this. Okay, this translator relief thing that we did was basically in direct response to what Prometheus did back a few years ago when they filed objections against all the translators. They decided to take that route. We decided to take the different route. We decided to go the rulemaking route. And that's how REC addressed that issue. Because, honestly, I was not too happy with I wasn't too happy with all those objections being filed. Especially when I was not even in town when it happened. I was in Elkhart, Indiana, attending the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters when that happened. I was in a hotel room, 7 in the morning in Elkhart, Indiana, when I started getting emails from people about these, and then I go to the FCC Today, and by that time the CDVS had already updated there. And I had this huge line of informal objections, and they all were from Prometheus et al. So I was like, oh, shoot. I had to put out an immediate statement that said, we'll have a more prepared statement tonight, within the next 24 hours. And then that night I basically disavowed everything about that, said that this is, this does not representative of the whole LPFM community, because what I didn't want was, I didn't want LPFM as a service being painted by what they did. What they did was, I kind of disagree with what they did, but I kind of understood why they did it. And in some cases, they may have had legitimate points if the commission decided back in 2014 that this is the way we were going to enforce the LCRA, but it wasn't. So basically what this turned into was, about 800 untimely petitions for reconsideration of the original FCC decisions on AM revitalization. So one case is still pending, and that's the Philadelphia case. And that one is, I believe that one's still in, I think that one's still in application for review. And and the issue, of course, is what does the LCRA say? Some people think that the LCRA, the equal in status and community need, means that there's got to be 50% LPFM, 50% translators in an area, which is not true. And I don't necessarily support that notion either. But I do feel that there needs to be as much flexibility as possible for LPFMs, and that includes using contours to be able to get into translator areas. Whether this is worth whether this is an issue that is worth burning up, burning bridges on a reconsideration. I'm not really inclined to do it on this one. But I have told LPFM Coalition, I've told Prometheus, I've told others, and I've said it publicly before, that if they want to file a recon on the translator relief, be my guest. I'll come in behind it and support I'll come in behind and support it, but I'm not going to initiate reconsideration on the translator relief. That was basically done as a favor to them, to the LPFMs that were concerned about the translator interference. And that was done as a favor to them. And if they want to run with it, either they need to file a recon or they need to get with me and we'll work together on a recon. But I'm not gonna blow a recon on that one. Now, let's see. One of the other issues is very quick one here, was actually one that we brought over from Dave Solomon, believe it or not, over at the LPFM advocacy group. He put out this RM11753, which was just completely loaded with garbage. And they were trying to get translator rules for LPFMs and trying to violate the Local Community Radio Act every way they could. There was one little gem that was in there that I decided to adopt and take over to our rulemaking, and that was the ability for an LPFM station to drop the LP on a call sign if they're the only one that has that call sign. And the FCC rejected it, claiming that there's administrative reasons why the LP still needs to be there. So again, little issue that I just, I tried on that one. Now, probably for the item that you're probably all watching this for and having to put up with all my psycho-babbling about here up till now. We've been on the air for about an hour now. LP 250. Now, as you know, there's been, in this proceeding, there's actually been 3 different flavors of LPA 250 that's been proposed. We originally came in with what we knew as the 73815 regime, which was a hybrid of distance separation and contours towards towards full service stations. And the idea was to do it like the 73215 rule in full service. You meet a shorter minimum distance separation, in this case the LP10 numbers, and then you had to do contour for the rest of the way. And that was the original idea. That was the original idea of the 73815 regime. It was totally optional. You could slip into that. If you slipped into that 73815, then you were subject to the translator interference remediation rules. And that's what was proposed. And of course, the FCC doesn't like contours that much, especially if it's contours to protect other stations. Also, too, they had a huge LCRA issue with the LP10 numbers, even though we could legally use the LP10 numbers if you read the LCRA to the letter, based on the 2012 interpretation of the LCRA, which we're going to talk about here because it changes. So the FCC did not like that. They rejected it in footnotes in the notice of proposed rulemaking. So we came in and we said, okay, if the LP10 is the issue, let's do this. We ran the numbers and we said, okay, let's do this as an LP100. We'll do this with the LP100 numbers. So you've got to meet LP100 minimum distance separation, and then let the contour take you out to 250 if you can. That was the idea, and that's what we ran with in the comments for the proposed rulemaking. And then by the time we reached the draft report and order, which came out about 3 weeks ago, the FCC said at the time, well, REC, you got a problem with your proposal is that we still think it violates the Local Community Radio Act because you're penetrating the buffer zone. You're going to do a 250 watt station. Let's say it's a class. Let's say you're protecting a class A station. So you're having to use. Let's say you're protecting a class A co-channel station. So you're having to add an additional 5 kilometers to your interfering contour on your LPFM station. So now you are, and you're still at the same distance spacing requirement. So now you are coming 5 kilometers inside the buffer zone. There's still 15 kilometers between the interfering contour and the protected contour. So there's still protection. But you're 5 kilometers in. You've penetrated the buffer zone. We've decided now that the Local Community Radio Act, that interpretation of that section, that 3.1 section, is not just the numbers, but now it's also the formula. And that is interference contour plus buffer zone plus protected contour makes the minimum distance separation. Okay, so when they say buffer zone, they're meaning full 20 kilometers. So I'm like, okay, give me a couple days here. Munched out a bunch of code, and we ran all kinds of code. We have an upgrade program already that we can just make a run and say, okay, who can upgrade to 250? So we had to go into that code and make some rule changes in that code and develop new tables. So what we did was we said, okay, so if we want to honor the buffer zone, we want to honor the full 20 kilometer buffer zone, then that means that we have to extend our interfering we have to extend our interfering contour. So that means that we can't use the same numbers as LP100 anymore, but we have to use higher numbers now. So what we did was, like for Class A, that's 67 kilometers, which would be the normal LP100 to Class A. We now have to look at the interfering contour for a 250, which is 5 kilometers bigger, plus the 20 for the, so we went from, I think, 18 to 23 for the LPFM station's interfering contour, plus the 20 kilometer buffer zone, plus the 67 kilometer, plus the 28.3 kilometer service contour for a standard Class A. So our 67 went to a 72 minimum distance separation. So that means all the full service stations, the minimum distance separation went up 5 kilometers. Classes B went up 9 kilometers, and B1 was somewhere in between there. And so we went ahead, built that as in a new service class in our tables, in our systems here, and we reran the upgrade program with those new numbers. Now, of course, we lost some of the urban stations. Some of the more urban stations were lost in that, but in the rural areas, in the suburban areas, basically, I think the cutoff point where there was majority upgrade was, I think, metro market 75 and down. We saw a significant number of stations that could upgrade to LP250 from their current site. What was it? 25%. I think it was nationwide. 25% or 30% could upgrade. Current site, current height, without any second adjacent issues. And then second adjacent gets added in there, and then and then we go from there. But overall, we were still looking at about 2/3 of the LPFM stations in the country having some form of a upgrade opportunity as a minor change. And that's what we went with. So we went into this with these new longer distances. And we also simplified things. We got rid of contours. All we did was simplify the LP250 rules down to the point where LP250 was nothing more than just a second service class to LP100 with longer distances all the way around, not like the 2012 FCC proposal, which used the LP100 numbers. But we have new to LP250 numbers for full service. And that's what we went with, and we made it super simple. The simplest thing that's ever come out of the REC shop in many years. And so we called it Simple 250. And it's just, you know, again, it's just what we're doing right now for LP100, but with higher numbers as a separate service class. The FCC kind of gave me the impression, and of course, you know, keep in mind they may be hiding some things, which they're known to do. We saw that happen just in these past proceedings. That the I have a feeling they've got some appetite for this, because we've addressed every single issue that they had, and we've also extended out the service contours even further. And we extended out the interfering contours. The distances are not bunched up anymore. They're just like an LP 100, but at 250. The FCC really, the reason that they gave publicly was that it was rejected because we were kind of a day late and a dollar short, I guess you could say. Because we came in very late. We were in the last minute. I mean, my last meeting with the commission staff was like one day before the sunshine notice came out. And of course, the NAB had the last laugh. They got a letter in just under the sunshine date, basically saying everything I was talking about was bull crap, which is their normal stuff. And if you read the report in order, you'll see that the FCC is starting to take more fortitude in ripping into the NAB. And while I would love to have a good relationship with the NAB, the door is always open. The olive branch is out. It's up to them to reach back to us, because I would love to have a mutual kumbaya agreement with NAB on 250. So pretty much I'm in a situation now where I've got two choices. First of all, just so you know, I mean, going into this whole entire thing, I've been saying the whole entire time that LP250 needs to be on a further notice of proposed rulemaking. I didn't want the FCC to approve it that day. What I wanted was a further notice. So that way it would open up a whole new comment and reply comment period. So that way the NAB could comment, make their studies, make their arguments, use their old arguments of congressional record and all that, which will probably come up again if this goes on again. Bring up all these arguments that they want to make against it. New Jersey can come in, make their BS arguments about it. EMF can come in and fight the interference issue, the foothill effect stuff. And then we could have all the LPFM stations out there, the ones that we've identified that can upgrade. And then maybe EWTN can get involved. Maybe the Seventh-day Adventists can get involved. If Don Martin comes to senses and works with us, and like they did with Amherst many years ago. The whole reason why LP250 was rejected in the first place was because of Amherst Alliance wanting to do geographic redlining, and they wanted LPFM stations 250s to only be in very deep rural counties. Why? Because they were trying to legitimize 10-watt transmitters, pirate radio style 10-watt transmitters. That was the whole push for LP10. And of course, LP10 was eliminated back in 2013. It was one of the only times that REC and the New Jersey Broadcasters Association could agree on something. We were both against LP10. Too much noise floor, not enough noise. So there was that. So I got two choices. I could do reconsideration. Reconsideration is kind of hostile in a way. Should be saved for only real serious issues. I really don't want to use up too many of my reconsideration cards with the FCC. Not saying I've got a limited number of them, but I don't want them to think that I file recons on the drop of the hat. Now, I have stated to the FCC already in ex parte that if LP 250 doesn't come through, recon would be one of my considerations of how to handle it. And again, like I said, for the translator relief thing, I'm going to leave that up to if anybody else wants to file translator on translator relief. If they want to file recon on that decision, feel free. I will come in behind you and support that. But if somebody else wants to take the lead on translator relief, I'll be more than happy to let them have it. Translator relief is an issue for me. It is a big issue for LPFM. It's a big issue for channel availability. But right now, I've got enough fish to fry. I need somebody else frying fish with me here. This is a two-person grill. We need it. We need a second. We need a second fish fryer up here. If somebody wants to take the run on translator relief, please do so. If I would love to see LPFM Coalition, since they were the ones that really pushed a lot of that translator interference issues in the past. If Paul Boehm and Al Davis and Clay and them want to get together and do something on that and run with that issue, please do so. Please do so. I'm running out of energy on some of these things. I can only go so far. The other option for me, and I will be talking to staff about this, and staff kind of the report and order does kind of clue into this, is we're going to file another petition for rulemaking. Third time's a charm, maybe. One of the options I am looking at is filing a whole new petition for rulemaking, getting a whole new RM number. That would just basically introduce simple 250 and nothing else. No translator relief, no contours, no other things. I got people out there wanting me now to get channel 6 and channel 5 for broadcast use. No, we're not going there. Even though it's something we'd like to do, we're not going there. It's not a popular thing right now. And there's very little support for that. But the FCC kind of, like I said in the article that I wrote, they kind of cracked the door open for me on this one. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to need to come in with another petition for rulemaking. That's one of the options, is coming in with a petition for rulemaking, asking for only simple 250, nothing else. We're going to need more stories from LPFM stations, and especially right now with the pandemic going on. I'm still interested in building penetration issues. I'm interested in only hearing, though, from the stations that would be able to upgrade. Because one of the things we're not going to be able to do here is make non-upgradable stations upgradable. I want to make that very clear. We're not going to do flexing. We're not going to do contour overlaps and stuff like that to try to, or other kinds of weird waivers. And of course, like I said, we're not pursuing translator relief. So, we've got a list of stations. We've got that list already online. Go to check LP250, check check.lp250.com, and pull up your station and see what your status is right now. If you may be an upgrade candidate or not. And those are the stations I want to hear from. And like I said, it's mostly rural, 75 and down. And, especially in those areas where the LP stations do need to reach out a little more. I want to hear from those stations, and we want to get new stories, especially issues that you may be having right now reaching outlying rural areas and the COVID-19 and getting education out and complaints from listeners that, you can barely hear the station and such. That's what I'm interested. Also, too, for those stations, building penetration issues within your 3.5-mile area. That was a big seller on RM 11749. The nursing homes, where you can only hear the station in one half of the building but not the other because the building penetration at 100 watts is just not cutting it. Those are the stories we're interested in. We would like to pull together. We'd like to get a petition for rulemaking going. Yes, this would be the third time. Yes, I will have to do a lot of explaining on why the first two and why this is different than the first case, the second case, the third case, but the FCC kind of planted the seed and gave me the reason. And we're going to run with it. This way, if an RM number gets assigned, we got a 30-day comment period on the RM. That will give us a taste, and that will also allow other LPFM stations to come in with their stories. And of course, the NAB is going to fight it. EMF is going to fight it. New Jersey's going to fight it. They'll all fight it. But, they're going to have to dream up some new arguments, though, because they're running out of arguments. And this might be the way to do it. That is more LCRA worthy. So be looking for that. Right now, I've got a couple projects I'm working on right now, and but other than that, I'm gonna probably take a little bit of a half break, I guess you could say, for the next few days. The whole 19193 thing just kind of wore me out in some ways. But we got another one that's coming up here, and this one's actually a lot easier. A lot simpler, a lot more agreeable, and it's going to be a big benefit to LPFM stations, especially those that haven't done their renewals yet. Public notice. This is MB docket 17264. This is going to be in the May commission meeting. The story on this was originally, the original story was that, there's a provision in the Communications Act that requires broadcast stations to give public notice of certain types of applications, new station assignment, major changes, and such like that. These laws were passed by Congress in the early 60s, and they were in response. It was part of a series of laws that were put in place in response to the quiz show scandals of the 1950s, the fixed quiz shows, as well as the payola scandals that took place in the 1950s. And basically what it was a whole entire suite of laws for broadcasters to be more transparent. And many of those laws have been repealed over the years, but the public notice one has stayed around. And up until now, right now, when one of those kinds of public notices has to be done, it's done in the newspaper. The radio station would go buy an ad in the local paper, like in the legal section, and they would buy one ad for a week for 4 weeks, and that's how they would do and that's how they did public notice. Of course, this started in the 1960s when newspapers were dominant. They were empires. And every small town had a paper. Even if it was a weekly paper, they still had a paper. Now, of course, we all know that these days with the internet and newspapers left and right going out of business, consolidation, Gannett, Need I say Gannett? Obviously, the small town paper doesn't exist anymore. And so if you want to take out a legal ad, guess what? You're buying it in the big paper and you're getting the big circulation. A lot of eyes that really don't need to see it are going to be seeing it. And of course, you're going to pay the big city rates. Broadcasters finally got fed up with it. And they asked for relief. The FCC offered, what the FCC offered up was the ability to be able to do in some cases over the air, in some cases online. What the FCC originally came out with, the way it was read by us here, and the way it was originally proposed was that in order, for new entrants, you had to use a website that was locally known. So you could use a city government's website, you could use a Chamber of Commerce's website, you could use what they called a community bulletin board website, a website operated by the newspaper or a state broadcasters association. In comments, we made arguments against every single one of those. And we came back with the idea, how about a website that's dedicated to broadcast public notices? And so that's what we ran with. The FCC eventually now came out with the draft report in order yesterday. They rejected that idea, but they kind of cleared things up a bit. And I'm going to get sleep tonight because of this, because the way the rule is worded now is that if the organization has a website already, they'll be able to put their public notice on that website. And this is only for new stations, new entrants, because that's what I was concerned about. Was that, like, for example, we don't want to go through a situation where city governments have to approve. First of all, they have to pass an ordinance to allow the public notices to go on their websites anyway. And then the city government having to, quote, approve whether a radio station can come into their town. Also, too, how's that going to happen? How's that going to work with religious stations? We have establishment issues here, First Amendment issues going here. Chamber of Commerce, do you have to be a member? Community bulletin boards. This is the one that got me because, we put a survey out and said, okay, who has a community bulletin board website in their town? And I think maybe 15% of the folks said that they did. And, I was looking at it the other day and I was thinking, I found the perfect community bulletin board, so I will put all my public notices on as a Craigslist. Put them on Craigslist in the bulletin board section under the miscellaneous or whatever for that area. There you go. You've just met your obligation. I mean, that's kind of what we got there. And state broadcasters associations. Well, considering, okay, I need you to say 2 words on that. New Jersey. Okay, I rest my case. So the FCC did change that. It looks like they changed it the way it was worded, the way that I read the rule text. It is going to allow an organization that is going to be applying in one of the upcoming windows to be able to use their own station's website, their own organization's website, or their parent organization's website for the placement of the public notice. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to put a link or a tab on your website that that basically says FCC filings, takes them to another page. That other page will have the public notice text on it. That's how it's going to work. Commercial stations are going to do that also for their normal public notice requirements. Non-coms and LPFMs, if you're on the air, all of your public notices are going to be done over the air. And there's specific scripts. They're a lot shorter than the ones that we have right now for renewals. And for broadcasting over the air, whenever you do an application that does require public notice, you will be required to play that public notice announcement 6 times in a 4-week period, no more than once a day. So in a 4-week period, you can do 2 weeks with one a week and 2 weeks with 2 a week. They have to add. They can air anytime between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. Now this is way different than what we have right now with renewals, because renewals will fall into this rule. Right now we have the pre-file announcements. Those are not even required by statute. That's why the FCC just waived them for Michigan and Ohio. So the FCC is getting rid of pre-file completely under these rules. And then post-file will just be the 6 announcements in the first 4 weeks that the application was accepted for filing. So no more 1st and 16th of the next 3 months having to do one between 7 and 9 in the morning, one between 9 and 3, and one between, you won't have to do that crap anymore. I almost said shit. I did say shit. So you won't have to do that anymore. You'll just have to do 6 announcements over a 4-week period. So we're good with that. The one issue I will be dealing with the FCC is the announcement that they want to do for LPFM. Since LPFM doesn't have public file, what they're doing for full services, they're having listeners go to the public file. For LPFM, they're having them go to LMS. And so they have this FCC page called fcc.gov/search-LMS. And where it's taking them to is the LMS main inquiry page, where you still have to select, do you want to look at applications, facilities, ownership reports, pleadings. We got to get that fixed. We need to get that pointed to somewhere where it points right to an entry blank that says put in the call letters of the station. We need to get to that point. If it was CDBS, we could probably do something a little different. I mean, they really wanted to, they could do this right. And have a URL / the call letters. They really want to do it. Kind of do it like we do it with, oh yeah. We're not on the air. And even if we were, that would have been a fleeting expletive. It would have been allowed. Now, my videos are not monetized by YouTube. I don't have enough subscribers. Please get me up to 1,000. But, if that was, I would have had issues with monetization if that was, the case, I mean, because, it's like that, like on blooper, yeah, and, hold your ears if you're sensitive on this, but, it was I remember one time I heard this on a blooper reel one time, it's like, something like, it's like somebody gets on there and says, what does it say? Fuck. Oh shit, I just said fuck. Oh fuck, I just said shit. I am capable of those words. I rarely ever use them, but I am capable of them. Remember that. So, I think we got a good thing with the public notices. Also, too, this also finally puts into stone that the public notice rule does apply to LPFM. I wanted to make sure that that was in there. So in 73.801, there's going to be a cross-reference to 73.3580, which is the public notice rule. The public notice rule that we're going to have is much easier. It's much better. It's something that LPFM stations and NCEs can work with. And as long as we've got the ability for new entrants to use their existing stations, their existing organizations' websites, because remember, the FCC does give priority to existing organizations that are applying for their first station on LPFM, and actually for NCE also. You should already have a website. For new organizations that are forming, because I know there's a lot of you out there, you want to start a station. You're not really an existing organization right now, but you're starting the organization just to get the station, and you're hopefully forming your organization now, so that way, or earlier, so that way when the window opens, you'll have the 2 years and you'll be able to claim the point. do yourself a favor, get a website established, get content built up on there, get it so it's searchable in Google. So if somebody looks you up, they find your state, they find your organization. Also, too, it would help us here because we look at stations all the time, and we do inventories every so often. And you know, so many stations out there that don't have websites. They don't even have a simple website. You know, get with the program, people. Even if you don't stream, put up a website. You know, you don't have to pay ASCAP and BMI for just a radio station website with no music on it. You don't need that. So do it. Anyway, what was it? May 12th? Was it May 14th? I think it is. May 14th is the next commission meeting, and that's when this will be decided. Now, of course, they could decide it earlier because of the coronavirus. That's what happened with the LPFM thing. They did it the day before. They took those items off the agenda. They left 3 items on the agenda, including a semi-contested 5G issue. What the hell is all this stuff about 5G? People that are putting all these stupid conspiracy theories on there that it's causing coronavirus. I have to laugh every time I see that. Now, what are the ones I'm seeing today that, you know, injecting Lysol? Again, I'm not going to get political. I'm not going to get political here. REC is apolitical. I have my own personal political views, and those are on my personal Facebook page. They are not on REC. LPFM is bipartisan. With nearly a 50% base of faith-based stations on LPFM, we need to be. The LCRA was bipartisan. We must understand that we need to also quash all these theories that LPFM is this left-wing liberal conspiracy. LPFM is a radio service. It does what you want to do with it. Many of the folks who have fought for LPFM and have fought for citizens' access to the airwaves and have fought for media justice have been from the left side. And yeah, Prometheus and them are very left-oriented. That does not mean that the service is strictly a left service. Trust me, I've heard a couple of very strong and very interesting right-wing stations. We do have a few very conservative, right-wing, borderline militia-type stations out there. So, yeah. We've got the whole spectrum. Anyway, I don't know how many are still here. I don't look at the counts. So maybe it's just Dwayne and Ricky. I don't know. If anybody else is out there, check in on the chat. If you have any questions, this is the time. If you got any questions regarding anything that we just talked about, because, you know, 19.3 had a bunch of stuff in it. You know, there's written stuff on the website, recnet.com. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in now. And if not, we will jump out of here. If you know, if there's not that many questions, just have to see how this goes. Okay, it looks like we got 7 people watching right now. Hi, I joined in late today. Didn't know there was a bonus Michi. Yes, there's a bonus Michi. This was totally unexpected. I was involved in a video chat call just before this, and you know, we had stuff come out regarding the LP250, and so I decided, what the hell, we'll just come on and do our thing here, and that's basically what we've done here. So we're just we just went through and talked a lot about MB 19193 and the public notice rules. So once we're done with this thing, you can go pull it up. An hour and 40 minutes of Michi-chan's psychobabble. Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, I found my station cannot upgrade to 250. Yeah. If you're in a situation where you're very close, look at those distance separation numbers. If maybe there's another site that might work better, look there. Also, too, the system will sometimes tell you if there's a, it won't tell you the channels, but it may tell you that an alternate channel may be available. And it may have to be done as a minor change. It may have to be done with a minor change with a reduced interference showing. So we give you all the numbers there. And, and as we get closer, due to the IF, yeah, IFs will get you. And that the reason why we did the IF, we had to do the IF thing was because 100 watts or above, that's just consistent with translators with full service. Intermediate frequency is still a thing because of the 10.7 megahertz IF that's in FM receivers, and getting too close is going to cause a problem, and that's the reason why that's still there. That's kind of, I remember in the analog TV days, we used to have the taboo channels. This is kind of like the taboo channel for radio. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, in that case, you'd have to find a different channel. And yeah, the IFs are going to get you. Now, here's the thing: is that if you're in a situation too, another thing you might want to consider too, if you have a different if you're in a situation where you can increase your height where you're at, or you can go to an alternate site that is at a higher terrain, and you can get maybe above 30 meters above average terrain and still be able to put out like 99 watts or 100 watts at the higher height above average terrain, you could still have an LP250 strong station. Because remember, once you go up above 30 meters above average terrain, you're going to have to reduce power. So if you go above 30 meters above average terrain, and you're still at, and you're at a height where you could still get some decent kick with a 99 or 100 watts, you can beat the IF and still get like an LP250 kind of a signal. So there are ways around dealing with an IF. They may be few and far between, but there's still ways to deal with IF. And that's the reason why when you're in those kinds of situations, you talk to people like me that could figure this stuff out. Unfortunately, IF is a reality. That's something I would not negotiate out of. And says there's a new translator construction permit second adjacent. So 107. Oh, that'd be what, 107.5. We did a minor change from 97.3 to 96.9 due to a Class B 50 co-channel interference. So yeah, playing the channel shuffle here. Again, if you can find a different site or find a height increase, that could, even if it doesn't get you the full bang, at least you can go up higher. Now remember, you still have to protect everything, but that's pretty much what you've got there. So there are some things you could look at. Also, too, we need to look at what your second adjacent channel situation is. That's another thing we'd have to look at there when we're looking at those things. So yeah, there are solutions. Don't ever give up with IF. IF is just a is just an impediment. In many cases, it'll be a deal breaker, but sometimes you can work around it, especially if you got some height to work with. That's how the translators do it. They'll get the translators up on pretty high heights, and then they'll bring it down, and they'll just use the 99 watts. Translator can go to 99 before they break. We can go to 100 before we break. Actually, that was one of the things I worked on many years ago. Was originally LPFM did have IF restriction back when we were doing third adjacent requirements and such, and we did have that. And I argued there's really not much difference between 100 watts and 99 watts. And if we had the IF removed, we could open up more opportunities. The FCC agreed. And so they allowed, and also too because of because of the fact that translators were allowed, were allowed 100 watts without, 100 watts would have been IF, 99 watts would have been without IF. So, well, we were a little different because we're saying 100 watts without IF. So that's what we got the FCC to agree to, so, just 1 watt difference, what the hell. So, between that and the releasing of the third adjacent restrictions back in 2012, yeah, that did open up a flurry of frequencies. And we reap the results in the 2013 window. Last call for alcohol. Last call for comments. Questions. Suggestions. Boot to the head. Tell me what's on your mind. Crazy. Of course, I'm waiting for myself to come back on the guitar here. Yep. And so that way I know that there aren't any more questions. So with that, everyone, be safe. Go out only when you need to. Stay home the rest of the time. Listen to RECFM, recfm.org. Listen to J1, J1FM. Try something different. And we'll see you soon.